Is my mic on? Can y'all hear me? No? Okay, how about now? Awesome. We're going to go ahead and get ready to get started here in a minute. I know everybody's time is valuable, and so I don't want to be the reason that it's gotten wasted. Just want to thank everybody for being here. This really actually means a lot to me. Been kind of talking this whole thing. I've been worried like nobody was going to show up to this, and I was like, how embarrassing would that be to put out an admin announcement and nobody wants to come hear me talk. So thank y'all for being here. To go ahead and make sure we make the most of our time, I'm going to introduce a couple people to y'all. I'd like to start off with Julia Elliott right here. She is going to be with the emergency management. A lot of what we talk about in here today is kind of about being prepared for safety. And if you're not aware that the university has a emergency management organization that assists the police department with preparedness and safety training and things like that. So I want to make sure we acknowledge them. So at some point, if you want to know a little bit more about being prepared for storm shelters or being prepared for fire or medical assistance, emergencies and things like that, you can get that type training through the emergency unit here at UNT. And then the other person I want to introduce is Tamara. She's with the counseling and testing. We understand that this particular topic is a sensitive topic and that some people may not be able to handle some of the stuff we talk about. It may bring it a little close to home or a little bit hard for them. So we wanted to make sure we had options for you that if you find that some of this stuff is too traumatic for you and you're just not, you need someone to talk to that can actually help you deal with the feelings you may be feeling, that's what she's here to do today. So if you need her, she's here for y'all. All right, let me grab my clicker and then we can get started. All right, so I got 3:01, so we'll officially get started now. All right, I want to take a moment and introduce myself. My name is Kevin Crawford. I am with the UNT Police Department. I kind of joke all the time, I'm hoping the badge and the gun gave that part away. Specifically what I do is I am over the community relations and the training unit. So I see a lot of familiar faces in here, so a lot of people know me. I want to talk a little bit about what we're here to talk about today, which is what you need to do to respond to an active shooter. Just to make sure we're clear, what qualifies me to come talk to y'all about it is not just that I'm a police officer. It is a bit of a passion of mine. And I'm wondering if it's the speakers. Are y'all getting that feedback too? Let me try stepping back a little bit. Let's see. What qualifies me to come and talk about this is not just that I'm a police officer, but it's a combination of it's a passion of mine. It's something that I've always tried to pay attention to, and it was just one day I recognized back in 2012 that there was not a lot being talked about in the law enforcement community about what to do in the event of an active shooter. And because I am in this position and the belief that I'm on this earth to protect and serve and basically be a guardian of other people, I felt like there was a need to start learning about active shooters so I could teach people what they needed to know. And so I just started learning and researching and learning all I could about it. I enrolled myself in a FEMA course to get certified to learn the FEMA program. Since then, I've also gone through an organization called Alert. Alert, just to familiarize y'all with it, is FBI's, it's a third-party kind of private organization, but it's the organization that the FBI has officially put all their weight behind, that has said that this is the organization we sponsor. And so they have a program called Citizen Response to an Active Shooter Event, and I went through their Train the Trainer program. So that's kind of what qualifies me to come talk to y'all about this today. All right? I'm going to try to stand where I don't block the view. If for any reason y'all can't see something, please let me know. All right. So take a second and read this disclaimer. While y'all reading, I'm going to explain a couple things. I want to make sure y'all know that there is going to be one particular slide in here that has some audio. I want you to know ahead of time so you can prepare yourself. I don't want to tell you when it's there because it is there for educational purposes and it is there a little bit for effect to bring into the reality of what we are here to talk about. But please understand that our goals, anything that I express here or anything on this PowerPoint, is because we want to educate and prepare you for a worst case scenario. We want to give you the tools to succeed, okay? The other part is that there are no black and white answers. Things that I talk about today may not apply in every single situation. The active shooter is a unique thing. It's a very dynamic situation. There's always new elements that could change what needs to be responded to. So what we provide today is basically some generalities to give you that option to sit there and kind of, again, that toolbox to refer back and say, hey, this is one of the things that I consider using in my response right now. So that's kind of what today's training is going to happen. That's what we want to do with this. So here's our learning objectives. By the end of this presentation, we hope that y'all understand, at least be able to answer these questions. We want you to be able to identify what exactly is an active shooter. We want to talk about what steps you should take during an active shooting. We want you to be able to state what you could expect from law enforcement. That was one thing when I started creating this program back in 2012, was I recognized a lot of the training out there never really talked about what to expect from the police department. They just talked about, running and the hiding and the fighting that we're going to go into. And I felt like that's kind of a major component to an active shooter response. Because the reality is that when we're coming to the scenes, we're bringing guns to the scene as well. So we want to make sure, I want y'all to know what y'all can expect from us, so that things you can do to make our jobs easier and things that you can do to ensure that everybody stays safe. All right? We want you to be able to describe real briefly. We're going to come into some steps to stop some bleeding. That could be important. You could be the person that saved somebody's life. And we want to make sure at least you have a general idea of that. Now, the new thing that we are going to introduce, we've always talked about prevention options. But one of the evolutions of this program, I've made some changes since I first started this, so the latest introduction to my new evolution is prevention. I recently read a report about 120 pages from the Department of Justice written by their Behavioral Analysis Unit. And the title of this report is Making Prevention a Reality. And what they talk about is a little bit more about the behaviors of the shooter. Because I'm going to argue, what better way to protect yourself from an active shooter incident than to recognize that where the danger is happening beforehand, the person's character or the behavioral traits, and identifying them and getting the authorities or the people involved before it reaches that level. So we increase that in information today, and we're going to talk about it. Y'all are honestly kind of the guinea pigs to seeing what that program, part of the program, is going to be like. So hopefully y'all enjoy that. This is the definition from the Homeland Security of an active shooter. One thing I want to draw attention to is that it's typically through the use of firearms in that definition. The steps and the training today is going to be centered around the shots fired, a gunshot situation. But when we hear active shooter, we do tend to focus in on the shooting. I mean, it's in the definition, right? But I also want you to keep in mind that there are other ways that people can cause mass murder, okay? And that's what an active shooter is. It's a mass murder. Who knows what happened at the University of Texas in Austin about 2 years ago? I can't remember if he was a student or not, but an individual armed with a knife basically stabbed 4 people and killed one UT student. So even though we focus on the gunshot aspects in today's training, please keep in mind that these steps can still work in that type of situation. So don't get isolated that this person potentially has a knife or a bat or some other kind of weapon that could cause mass murder and think that the responses are going to necessarily be different. I will tell you the one mass murder that I thought was going to increase in the United States, and it hasn't happened, and I'm grateful for that, was going to be the vehicle mass murders. I really thought a couple years ago we were going to see more vehicles driving into crowds, and that's not necessarily been the case, thank God for that. So these steps right here, I'll be honest, aren't going to help you in that situation. The best advice I can have you is in that situation is if you find yourself in a mass crowd and a car's gunning towards y'all, get behind the biggest tree, the biggest wall, the biggest thing that if you were driving that car, it wouldn't get through it very easily, and get behind that as fast as you can, okay? So simply put, we're talking about somebody that is armed with a deadly weapon with the intent on killing. That's what they want to accomplish. We're talking about somebody that accepts targets of opportunity. Today's training is about giving you those tools to not be a target of opportunity. That's what I want to make sure you walk away with here, is that you know how to prevent yourself from being a target of opportunity. That's what it's all going to be about. They basically will move throughout a location until they're stopped. That stop can be by the police, till they stop themselves, or until somebody like yourself steps up and stops them. Understand that their mentality is typically to kill or injure. That's what they're there for. Whether it's a personal statement or political statement, whatever reason they are in that location, their location is their hope is to kill and injure people. And understand that there is no typical profile for an active shooter, all right? I can't say that because she's the person sitting here on the front row, she's abnormal, nobody else sat up here by her, so y'all should keep an eye on her and her alone. There is no profile like that. It's not about the age, sex, race, religion, education. It's about the behaviors, and that's one of the parts we'll talk about in the prevention, is the behaviors. So I don't want y'all to get focused in on thinking that an active shooter is going to meet one particular profile, okay? So FBI did a study of 160 incidents covering the years 2000 to 2013. out of that report, these are some of the bullet points I thought had the most value to potentially protect our community. So specifically, you need to know that all 2 incidents involved basically a single shooter. So we're not talking about an army of people coming in and committing a lot of mass murder. We're talking about one person with some kind of motivation, again, political or personal statement that they want to make, but one person is the one that's coming in to cause the harm. This one's really, really important. 70% ended in 5 minutes or less. It's not that you can have somebody, we're talking about from the moment the violence starts to the moment the violence ended, it's typically going to be under 5 minutes, all right? It's not going to be hours upon hours that if you choose to hide, that you're going to have to secure yourself from getting a person from getting in there. If you're in a fight stage, it's not that you're going to have to spend hours upon hours trying to fight this person. It's going to be something that's going to take a quick response that's going to end very quickly. Now, I do want to keep one thing in perspective. How long, does anybody know how long the Dayton, Ohio active shooter incident took place recently? 32 seconds. From the moment he fired the first shot to the moment the police stopped him, 32 seconds. 9 people were shot and killed. So I'm not trying to scare you. I just want to keep it in perspective that yes, 5 minutes is not much time, but it doesn't take a long time either to hurt people, okay? Now this one's super important. In this study, 13% of those incidents were stopped when unarmed citizens stopped the shooter from hurting other people, okay? We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I want to make sure you know that you can fight this fight and win this fight. Don't think that because they have the gun, they have all the advantages. Now, we all have this stereotype about a college atmosphere. We all think that an active shooter is going to happen any day now, right? I mean, I think we walk around going, okay, I'm on a college campus, so it's just any day till we get one. So I'm going to ask a couple of y'all, and hopefully y'all will volunteer your hands, but why do we think that? Why do we think a college campus is a vulnerable spot for an active shooter? Okay, what do you got? You're not allowed to bring guns?
It's our world, so we focus on those instances.
Okay. It's our world, yes?
Many of the incidents that we remember most are incidents that happened at high schools, happened at schools in general.
Okay, schools. Anybody want to throw out anything else? Let's see, go. I'll work my way up to you two, and you'll all be the last.
There's lots of people coming in and out in the area.
Populated area, okay. Gentleman, and then the gentleman in the purple shirt. Go ahead. It's newsworthy, okay. Populated area, okay. So I would agree. Our campus is populated area. Would you say that our population is under a bit of a stress in life? Okay. All right. What age does mental illnesses typically appear? 18 to 22, right? Basically. So what age are our college students? And to be clear, in that one report, we'll talk about this a little bit more later, it actually kind of disconnects most of your average mental illnesses with an active shooter. And also, by the way, based on the information in that report, they kind of debunked that high stress part a little bit too, okay? But all those were reasons that we think that a college campus is a vulnerable place for an active shooter. I would agree with the populated area. I would agree with the news part because, yeah, if a University of North Texas had an active shooting incident, I guarantee that's going to be all over the news. A perfect example about this is who knows about the active shooting incident that took place in Arlington about 2.5 years ago? Textbook definition of an active shooter. An individual armed with a handgun walked into a bar, shot and killed one person, and then eventually was stopped by a license to carry holder. Textbook definition of an active shooter. The local news channels only talked about it for one night. The national media, nothing at all, because ultimately of the 2 people shot, one of them was the shooter that was stopped and killed. So that goes back to that vulnerability of the university. I'm not trying to scare y'all in here. I'm trying to bring into that stereotype of why everybody thinks a university is a vulnerable target. But I want to bring you back to reality based on the studies. So I will tell you that this covers 250 incidents from the FBI from the year 2000 to 2017. And what they have identified, and I've read report after report after report from the FBI, is that you're more likely to encounter an active shooter in a commerce location than you are here at the University of North Texas, okay? So in fact, if 42% of them was at a commerce location, of the educational institutes, you have 20.8 took place out of those 250 incidents covering year 2000, 2017. But if we break down that educational institute, only 6% of that 20 actually occurred at colleges of institutions, okay? The reason this matters is yes, I want to prepare y'all for the worst case scenario, but I don't want you coming to work, I don't want you coming to school with the mentality that you're in danger every single day. I want you to be prepared for it, but keep in perspective that you are just as likely to encounter an active shooter while you're eating at a restaurant, okay? So keep that in mind. So this is the audio that I'd mentioned, and I ask you to please be patient. I'm going to explain one of the reasons why I have that audio in here. But before I get to that, I want to start off with talking about the 3 steps real quick. So we have what we teach is run, hide, fight. I want to make sure a couple things clear on this. This is one of the things, this is what the federal government has released as the steps you take to survive. And I'll be honest, as active shooter incidents occur, I kind of study and I review them. And one of the things I pay the closest attention to is what did survivors do to survive? Because I want to hear their side so that I can take that information and bring it back to my community. I can give y'all information from people who were there and what they did to survive. In some form or fashion, the majority of the survivors' testimonies that I read and or see on the news reference that they chose a run, hide, fight process, okay? So I really do believe in this system. Now, I will tell you that just because I have run listed as one, doesn't mean you have to run before you can decide to hide. You could potentially have the violence start in your location, and it's too late to run, it's too late to hide, it's time for us to fight. The violence has already found its way to us, and we need to take action. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. The other thing is, just because you make a commitment to run, doesn't mean that you can't potentially come across new information and have to make a decision that now I need to hide. It's a very fluid 3-step process based on the information that you have at that time. But I do argue that there is a step before these 3 steps. You have to recognize that there's a danger happening in the first place. I added this after the Oregon Community College active shooter incident in 2015. 8 individuals were shot and killed. I watched a survivor testimony who stated that her and her classmates had thought someone just pushed books off of a desk. And it wasn't until a classmate stepped out in the hallway and was gunned down by the shooter that the rest of the class recognized that this was an active shooter incident. So I go back to, I bet you all y'all in here are like, hey, I know what gunshot, or there's gonna be people, and we shouldn't say all. Who in here would say, I know what gunshots sound like, without a doubt? Okay, so a little bit of my background. I was in the Army for 6 years, and then I've been a police officer here for 13 years. I've had a lot of time where I've shot a lot of big guns and put a lot of bullets down range. That's part of my career field. But every 4th of July, I play every cop's favorite game, fireworks or gunshots, right? The reality is that you may sit here and tell yourself, I know what gunshots sound like, but so many things can affect the sound of gunshots. How far away was the shots fired? How big is the gun that was fired? How many sound barriers are between me and where the shots were fired that could have absorbed that sound? It's not that you don't recognize gunshots. It's not, I want you to recognize more than was that gunshots, okay? So let's go back to this audio. What do we hear in this audio along with our gunshots? Screaming, right? So we hear that gunshots followed by screaming. That is, I recognize the danger now. I need to follow the run, hide, fight principles. It could be that they're running away. The Pulse nightclub active shooter incident in Orlando, Florida. Individuals thought the DJ was playing music with gunshots in it, and it wasn't until they saw people running away from the shooter that they recognized that the danger was happening, okay? So to do this, you've got to always be aware of your surroundings. Do you hear gunshots followed by the screaming? Do you hear gunshots followed by seeing people run away frantically? Do you hear gunshots followed by an eerie quiet when normally you would hear everyday operational stuff happening, right? So once you recognize that this is an incident, that's when we want you to start following the run, hide, fight. So let's talk about run, or I'm sorry, skipped ahead a little bit. Let's talk about shots fired, okay? So a natural human reaction in a high-stress moment is you do fight, flight, or freeze. I will tell you that studies have shown the individuals who freeze, the individuals who do absolutely nothing in these moments are typically the targets of opportunity. They are typically the ones who become victims of the shooter's actions. So today, again, I'm trying to give you the tools so that you're not a target of opportunity. I want to make sure you know at the end of the day what you could do in this moment besides freeze. Now understand that there could be a sensory overload. there could be a lot happening. It could be a chaotic situation, and you need to process things that are happening. The other part is I'm going to tell you that you need to remain calm in this moment. Now, I get hit on this one a lot. People are like, are you kidding me? Remain calm during an active shooter incident? What are you, crazy? But I always tell this story to kind of bring it into perspective and a reality. Has anybody ever, are y'all the people that misplace things? Like, I'm that guy. Like, I set stuff down a lot and forget where I set it down at. And I'm going to show y'all this particular thing. So just like in Hollywood, we really do have these wallets with our badges in them, right? And credentials, right? Policy says I got to carry this on duty and off duty. So I'll never forget one particular night. I'm getting my wallet out, or trying to go find my wallet, get all my gear ready for work the next day, right? And I go to my bag where I carry my police, law book and tickets and all this other stuff. And I'm making sure my wallet's in there before I go to bed, and I can't find my wallet. It's not in that bag. I'm like, wait, what? Oh, it's okay. I'll probably put it over in my drawer. I go to my drawer. It's not in my drawer. So I start searching the house, and I start getting in this panic mode. I'm freaking out because I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I don't have my wallet. Like, I went to the movie theater yesterday. When I rocked back in the chair, could it have fallen back out of my wallet and landed on the ground? Now some random stranger's running around with my wallet going, they're police officer Kevin Crawford. I'm going to have a warrant issued for my arrest because someone's pretending to be a cop that's not a cop under my name. Oh my God, I got to go tell my boss tomorrow that I've lost my police officer badge and credentials, and some random stranger's running around there with my wallet right now. And I am freaking out. I'm in an absolute panic mode. Now, fortunately for me, I have a wife who knows me, and she knows what to do to calm me down when I panic. So she comes in and she starts petting my head. She's like, honey, calm down. I'm like, calm down. Do you know what's at jeopardy here? I'm going to get fired tomorrow. We're going to have to sell our house. I'm like freaking out. She's like, babe, calm down. Go back and look in your police bag because that's where you normally would put it. I'm like, I looked there. Of course it's not there. She's like, honey, just please go back and check your locations all again. All right? And like I said, keep in mind, I was searching these things while I was panicking. So I go back to my police bag, and sure enough, in that pocket is my wallet. Now, I'm not convinced my wife didn't plant it there yet, but I haven't been able to prove it. But my wallet was in there. Y'all have to understand, I am literally trained to find the contraband that people don't want me to find. That is part of being a cop, is being able to search things. And when I was in my panic state, looking for this wallet, I probably literally put my hand on it and in that bag, and I couldn't process that I was touching my wallet because all I could think about was I'm getting fired, a warrant's going to be issued for my arrest, and I'm in a full freak out mode. Now imagine your life is on the line. You have to make decisions that could be the difference whether you live or die. If you're in that panic state, how effective do you think your decision making can be? Probably not, right? Just like me, you're freaking out and you could be making poor decisions, processing information. So how do we remain calm? I tell a little funny story, but how do I put this in perspective to remain calm? Well, first things first, you have to avoid thinking worst case scenario. Okay, y'all heard me talking about it. I'm going to have a warrant for my arrest. Like, really? I look at it all these years, I'm like, really? That's a little bit of a stretch. But I allowed my mind to go to worst possible case scenario, which all that did was increase the panic and the fear. The other part is that your heart's going to be pounding. Your adrenaline's going to be pumping. You're going to have to make a deliberate effort to breathe and slow your heart rate down. So to try to remain calm. One more thing, a little story to kind of put this in perspective. Anybody seen that movie Long Shot with Charlize Theron and Seth Rogen? Okay, so long story short, Charlize Theron is playing the Secretary of the State in of the U.S., and she's all put together, clearly, right? So she and Seth Rogen find themselves in this stressful situation where life is on danger. And I know it's a movie, but what they do here just makes sense. So she's sitting there doing this breathing exercise. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, 3, 2, 1. And she's staying calm through this whole stressful situation. Now, Seth Rogen, being the lovable loser that he is in a full state of panic mode. He's, oh my God, freaking out, running around, going crazy, driving her nuts. So she's like, look, you need to calm yourself down, do this breathing technique to get your heart rate to slow down so you can be calm. So he starts off, of course, going 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, 3, 2, 1. And just panicking, almost hyperventilating. But eventually, by the time this portion of the movie happens, He's 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1. And yes, again, I know it's a movie. The script was written that way, but the concept is correct, is that in the process of doing those things, he went from a full panic mode to terrified about the worst case scenario to being calm and being able to rationally process what was happening. And that's one of the reasons why you're going to need to remain calm. Is imagine trying to make the decision that, hey, I need to get out of this building, but you're too busy, scared, you're too freaked out, too busy thinking worst case scenario, and now you can't process the idea that, hey, there's an exit over here that I can get out. I don't have to go out the main doors, okay? So that's one of the things we're talking about with that. Now going into the run, you want to consider the location of the shooter, and we don't want you to evacuate if you could become a target of opportunity. Keep in mind the target of opportunity could also apply in, you don't know where the shooter is, and by running out of the location of, like, let's just say in the Union building, if we run out that door right there, we could potentially run in the shooter because we didn't know they were out there. We might not want to run out. We might want to consider another option. Always consider the possibilities of other locations to evacuate. Just because everybody came through these doors right here, right? I keep pointing to them, doesn't mean that there's not another way to escape out of this building. What if I told you you could go right out this curtain right here, and there's a door that would lead you out of this building, right? Always be mindful of multiple exits that you can use to escape. Some of those can include getting out of a window, right? If you have to, smash out your window and climb out a window. Whatever it takes to evacuate in this moment, consider those options. You want to have your route planned ahead of time in your mind. We don't want you running up and down hallways trying to figure out how to get out of a building, because what happens while you're doing that? You become a target of opportunity. We don't want that. We want you to know that, hey, if I go out this way, then I go out that way, I can go outside. How do we do this? Well, for one, when you come to work every day or when you're going to class, take ownership for where you're at. Ask yourself one day, what does this door lead? Now, if there's no signs that say fire alarm emergency or don't go through this door, maybe you go out that door one day and you just see, where does this door go? So that way you know ahead of time, okay? You obviously want to leave your belongings. Nothing you own is worth your life. Leave it and just go, okay? You want to help others evacuate if possible. You're going to have people that, despite my best tips of trying to say remain calm, because when you're not calm, you can't process information, they're going to be in a panic state. Maybe we grab them by a t-shirt and say, follow me, let's go, right? I'm going to get us out of here. But anybody in here ever been lifeguards? Okay. So when you were a lifeguard, kind of-ish, apparently, if you swam out to try to save somebody and they fight you, and they're resisting you and drowning you in the water too, do you keep trying to save them? No, because otherwise 2 people drown, right? So in the same situation, you're helping that panicked person get out, but if they're slowing you down, drawing too much attention to yourself, you may have to say, okay, you're on your own, I've got to go, okay? So be mindful of that part. Obviously, help people with disabilities. Some people may not be able to quickly get out. We don't want you to abandon them and say, good luck. Maybe you could be the hero that says, come with me, I can get us in a room and I'll lock us down and I'll be here with you, okay? So don't abandon the people who can't evacuate on their own. Don't interfere with the police on your way out, and don't stop to treat seriously wounded. If you stop to try to treat somebody, I'm not telling you somebody that's, with some assistance can get out. I'm talking about somebody that's shot, unconscious, unable to get up and walk on their own. You don't stop to treat them, because while you're trying to help them, what happens? You could be a target of opportunity and the shooter now sees you helping somebody else, okay? And then after successfully evacuating the building, and we'll talk about this a little bit more about call 911, but get to a safe location. Get away from the building, get to a safe location, and call 911 immediately. So this technique is called slicing the pie. It's a technique I first learned in the military. Full transparency, it's a very slow, methodical way to check blind corners, okay? I throw this in here because if you want to go home and impress your family and be like, hey, look at me, and slice the pie, because as you can see, basically what you do is you take little corners, little oval, and you take corners, and as you're sitting there looking at the different slices, you're seeing whether somebody's around that corner without ever really breaking the safety of that wall. So again, I'm not telling you that this is what I want you to do in the moment, but feel free to go home and play around and practice it. At the end of the day, I just want you to know what's around that corner before you run there. I want you to know what's at the bottom of the stairs before you run down the bottom of the stairs. Because if you could run into the shooter, we want to avoid them, right? So I don't care if you do like 1980s cop movie and you're like looking like peekaboo. Okay, good, it's safe, let's go, right? Just take that moment to recognize what's around those corners before you proceed. So take a quick second, read this scenario. All right, so to save time, I'm going to ask y'all, and y'all just show me your hands. Who here says that we continue with our evacuation? Okay? Y'all are going to say we continue evacuating? Who here says that we possibly consider doing a hide phase now? Right? Okay. So I want to go back to the disclaimer first of all and remind everybody there are no black and white answers. Every situation is going to be different. But based on the information I provided you here, if I had to make a decision, I would make the decision to go back and hide. We see wounded in this scenario, we see wounded in this area, right? So we know the shooter's been there. We've got signs of that. Just because we don't hear any more shots fired doesn't mean the shooter's not in the area. What if they've run out of targets to shoot at and they're waiting for someone to come into this area? What if they're in the middle of a reload and just as they get their weapons back reloaded, you walk around the corner into this evacuating where we know the shooter was, right? So based on the information I've given you here, I'm not going to continue forward with my evacuation. Remember, I told you it's a fluid system. I'm going to make the decision to hide, right? Which is part of the segue. Now, I'm not telling you got to go all the way back to point A where you started from. No, we get to this location, we see wounded people, we don't hear the shooter in the area, but we know they've been there. We know around the corner in that office, we haven't seen any signs of the shooter, so I'm running to that office around the corner. All right, that's what we're talking about. So when you make the decision to hide, if you're not in a room, hurry up and get in one. Once you're in there, we want you to lock the doors if the doors can be locked. We want you to shut off the lights, and we want you to start taking all the heavy-duty furniture you can and start stacking it up as high and as deep as you can on that door, okay? Remember we discussed it. FBI study showed that 70% end in 5 minutes or less. We may not be able to stop them from opening the door because not all doors have locks. Not all doors open inwards. Some doors open outwards. But what we can do is we can create an obstacle that will slow them down. We will make it harder for them to get access to us. And that's what we want to try to accomplish right now. That's why we're going to stack all the heavy-duty furniture we can and slow them down. All right? Now, a couple things to think about. Again, remain calm, right? Okay, sure. We want to remain quiet. Noise discipline. Even the sound of a cell phone going zzz, zzz, could be the sound that draws the attention of the shooter and brings them to your location. Who's ever been out in the country during nighttime hours, like away from the city, right? What do you notice about sound out there? Everything, right? Everything is amplified in the lull of the silence away from the city. And it could be the same way in this situation. There could be a lull in the noise happening around you. The shooter could, every little unnecessary, and again, it's not that you can't make any noise, it's making unnecessary noise could draw the attention of the shooter. Like there's no way, like if we were in a classroom and I wanted us to hide, I can't come in here and there's no way for us to make noise or to put tables down without making noise. But instead of going like, okay, everybody, gather up, let's grab tables, right? I might be like, hey, here, grab this table, let's go. Instead of throwing up against the door, I'm going to set it down. I'm going to be mindful about those unnecessary noise. Now, light discipline is basically about trying to make unnecessary light, okay? Your eyes are naturally attracted to movement, right? That's what your eyes will naturally attract to. Now, in a dark room, you're looking at your cell phone every 15 seconds to see if we've said that the shooter's done, right? What's happening right now? Every time you do that, you're flashing your face. You're drawing movement. Well, what if that shooter can see around the corner and can see that movement? That's what's going to draw their attention to you. So again, avoid having some light discipline. Don't create movement with lights that you don't need. Take a look at that's what it could look like. Does anybody have any doubt in their mind that if a shooter walked up to these windows in any one of these locations, that they would be able to sit there and say, there's nobody in this room, I'm going to keep walking? No, it's pretty obvious. So it goes back to my statement. We're trying to create an obstacle. We're trying to slow them down. How difficult would it be for that shooter to get in there? Right? It's not going to be easy, and it helps give you an advantage. The other thing I want to draw attention to is going to be this right here. A lot of the doors, if you look around campus, a lot of the doors work like this. Basically, it's a hinge, kind of hydraulic hinge system. Taking a belt, like anybody in here, if you were in an active shooter incident right now, and you had a leather belt, would anybody in here not actually want to donate your belt for the cause? Right? So chances are somebody has a belt that will donate it. I'm not telling you to do this and rely on this alone. I'm telling you about a multi-layer approach to slow them down. You would do this and still stack the furniture on top. Basically, you're going to wrap that belt around that as tight, as small as you can, and as many times as you can to keep those two pieces from opening up. Now, I've had some folks with the emergency management college program have told me that doesn't work, well, whatever. I used to not even promote it in the program because I was like, I've had too many people tell me that they've seen things where it doesn't work. So one day, myself and Scotty Selman, the actual emergency manager, decided to test this on a presentation or on a discovery part. To be clear, everybody, I'm going to tell you all a little secret. So my nickname at the police department is Heavy Hands Bam Bam. Okay? The reason that is because typically if something's broken, somehow I'm connected. Like there was a period of time where I used to test equipment, and if it didn't break, we would consider buying it because it was strong quality product, okay? So when we decided to test this, Scotty Selman wraps his belt around this. And I go to the other door. I'm like, okay, all right, that's a little firm. I'm like, all right, let's get into this, all right? I'm trying. I got my foot up against the wall at one point. I'm like, ah! I'm like, if I break the door, it's in the name of public safety. I am trying to force my way in the door, and I can tell you, I was not able to ever open that door at any point in time. So I do have some faith in this. But again, it's not that we're relying on this alone. It's a multi-layer approach to making it harder to gain access to your hiding location. So fight. The next phase in our run, hide, fight. Now, I can tell, I want y'all to think about this. Y'all got to do some internal soul searching because I'm going to ask y'all in a minute. But I know there's some people in here that are like, when I use the word fight, they're like, So I'm going to ask y'all in a minute, and I need y'all to own it, okay? But before I do that, I want to be clear. We're only talking about when your life is in imminent danger. Again, it is too late to run. It is too late to hide. The violence is in your location, and freezing is not an option because freezing equals not surviving, okay? I want you to understand that it's usually going to be one or maybe two shooters against the many. I want to say we have, since I'm recording, I'm going to inflate my numbers. I'm going to say we have like 100 people in here, okay? So 100 people against one or two. That's an advantage in your favor, right? I want you to commit to doing so and doing so at 100%. I'm not suggesting we're going to go up and be like, stop. No, we're going in with the mind frame of like, I'm stopping you no matter what, period, okay? You have to go in the mind frame of, I'm going to survive this incident. The minute you start to let doubt creep in your mind, oh gosh, I hope I survive. Oh gosh, I hope I can stop them, is you've already allowed some weakness to kind of set in. And I don't mean weakness in a negative way. I mean that you're already psychologically starting to psych yourself out that you are ready for this fight. But if you go into the mind frame like, I'm going to win this and I'm going home, believe it or not, if you can convince yourself of that, it can make a difference in the moment. All right? Be aggressive, but attack with a plan. I don't need 100 people lining up and going, all right, ready, go. All right, tap out, my turn. No, that's not effective. We have 100 people in here, so we need to work together to stop this shooter from being able to hurt us. Now, all this stuff, I want to be clear when I talk about these fight steps, it's not like it's, okay, we're going to do this for a little while, and now we're going to do this. This is all happening fast and right away. We're acting without delay, and we're basically going to overwhelm them with our actions. So it's happening fast, okay? Virginia Tech, 2007. First room that the shooter went into, nobody fought back. Nobody did anything. 92% of the room was shot, right? Again, goes back to that freeze. Studies have shown the people that freeze and do nothing are typically the victims. So that's kind of why this point's here, to reinforce that. Second room they go to, and I've heard different things. I read one place where they used a table to block the door. In my craze training, they said that it wasn't a table, that basically a person laid on the ground, put their feet up against the door, and then someone laid on the ground, put their feet up against that person's shoulders, and so on and so on. And they basically created a train to stop that door from being open. Either way, they did something. They took an action, and basically the shooter could not open that door, and he shot through the door, and nobody got hurt. He couldn't get in the room. So he goes to a third room, shoots and kills people, goes back to that second room, still cannot get in that room, shoots through the door some more, nobody shot and killed. Doing something is the difference between surviving and not, okay? Please remember that. Now, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the fight. So if I were to say, here's a pair of scissors, and I need you, your job is to stab that shooter when they come in here. Who are not my scissor stabbers? Own it. Be proud. Okay. Not my scissor stabbers. You're like, nope, I'm not a fighter, Crawford. I'm not going to be a scissor stabber. All right. That is perfectly okay. So I'm going to pick on you because you're up front, but would you throw your cell phone?
Sure.
Okay, who else raised their hand? Okay, what would you throw?
I have a pocket knife.
A pocket knife? Okay, but you're not going to use it, right? You're not a fighter, you're a distractor? Is that what you're going?
Shoot, I kind of got mixed up.
Okay, no worries. Who else are not my scissor stabbers? Okay, what would you throw? Your cup, right? Again, I'm not suggesting we grab a piece of paper and be like, right? No. I want you to throw things that matter. A natural human reaction is you don't want to get hit with stuff in the face, period. If I took this and threw this, besides the fact that I have to write a Dear Chief letter for throwing this at somebody, right? The natural reaction is if something's being thrown is you're going to blink, you're going to block, you're going to try to step away. You're not going to stand there. Think about people. How often have you seen people just stand there and take something and get hit in the face? That doesn't happen. It's not normal. So my non-scissor stabbers, you're on the distraction team. It's your job to find whatever you want to take and throw it and make it a merit. And you're going to bombard them with them. And again, this is happening fast. This isn't that we're letting our distractors just throw for 5 minutes and then we're going to step in. No, this is happening, okay? Right away, and we'll get into the next phase in a minute. Because I'm not going to lie to y'all. I'm not going to tell you that while you're bombarding them with things that matter, that they can't pull the trigger. That would be a lie to you. But what I'm going to tell you is that the goal is to keep them from being able to accurately look down the sights of their gun and shoot. So we're going to bombard them to keep them from being able to sit here and do this, to keep them from being able to do this. We want them doing this instead, right? So that is the job of the distractor. Keep them from being able to accurately look down the sights of their gun because they're trying to avoid being hit by things you're throwing at them. Now understand that if you're a distractor right now, you're a distractor forever, okay? Now don't think that in the moment Chuck Norris is going to spawn in you and you can start to be a fighter. If you don't want to be if you're saying right now you're not a fighter, you're not going to be a fighter then. And the reason this matters is because if the violence starts in your location, it's too late. You're not going to have a plan. You're not going to be able to discuss, hey, I'm a distractor. It's not going to be distractors over here, fighters over here. It's going to be that you just have to act on it right then and there. So if you're a distractor, you should, just like we talked about knowing multiple exits to get away, as a distractor, you should always be eyeballing, what could I throw if I had to throw something right now? Start looking around the room. Find out what you got. What would I throw if I had to throw something right now? So that way, if the violence ever starts here, you don't have to think about it. You already know and you're doing it, okay? So those are my distractors, and y'all own it, okay? Be proud of that. Now, one thing I kind of skipped over is I'm sure there's some people here that are like, I'm not going to probably be either, and that's fine. But I want to remind you, the people that do nothing are the people that are typically the victims, okay? So there is something you can do. Maybe your job is to hand the distractors things to throw, okay? I don't want you just to think that it's okay to go stand in the corner and let everybody else do things. No. Let's say we have chairs. Maybe you're sliding chairs over the distractors so they can throw those chairs. That is doing something. That is taking actions that could potentially save your life and the life of others. So, attackers. Who's here like, I'll stab them twice, Sergeant Crawford. All right. You may hear me mad if you're not first in line to get to use those scissors? All right. So you guys are the attackers, okay? So obviously I've hinted at it. Makeshift weapons. Whatever you have, right? Pins, scissors, knives. For the record, I've seen what a high heel shoe can do when someone gets hit with it repeatedly. Lots of damage. If y'all all want to carry high heel shoes in your backpack, I won't judge, okay? It's not a bad thing. Those are great makeshift weapons. And your job as an attacker is to use force on force to stop their ability from hurting others. Stopping their ability can include things like removing the weapon from them or whatever it takes to stop their ability from doing anything at all. That is your job as a fighter, an attacker. And again, this stuff is happening fast. We're trying to overwhelm them with our actions. The violence is in our location, so distractors, just start throwing. Attackers, just like a distractor, you've already eyeballed things that you would use, and you grab that like a pocket knife, and you just go. You overwhelm them, okay? And that's what we're talking about in the fight. Now, before I move on to the next slide, I do want to talk about a couple things to think about on the fight phase, all right? A lot of people are going to say, like, the person with the gun has the biggest advantages because they have a gun, right? So a couple things I want to keep in mind is, one, we already discussed the numbers, 100 to 1. Who's got the numbers? You do. But there's also this thing that we learn in police work called action is faster than reaction, and that's what gives you the advantage. It's about forcing them to react to your actions. To put it in perspective, and I'm going to tell you all this is a real thing. I'm not making this up. It's called the OODA loop, okay? I promise. I want to say it was a Korean colonel created this OODA loop thing. So if y'all work with me and picture like a clock on the wall, right? So we have our 12, 1, 2, 3, so-and-so. So the way OODA loop works is basically if your hands are at the 12 o'clock, the second you decide I'm going to commit to an action, your OODA loop starts. The clock starts working its way around the face, right? So you can basically, and then make decisions that you're going to do things and then start putting those things in place a lot faster than the person to react. Because their OODA loop doesn't start until they recognize what actions you're taking, okay? So think about it this way. If you make the decision that when this shooter comes in here, I'm going to throw things at them, I'm going to stab them, I'm going to take them out at their knees, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And you're ready to go, they don't know what to expect exactly until they get in that room and they're like, oh my God, this is happening. And now, while your OODA loop is already at 10 o'clock, their OODA loop is just now starting, like I need to do actions. To kind of put it in perspective, I'm gonna tell you all what we teach our young officers. Think about like a traffic stop. A police officer makes a traffic stop. When we talk about actions faster than reaction. If, let's say the driver has a warrant for their arrest and they want to shoot and kill this cop because they don't want to go back to jail. All right? That's a real world scenario that police have to deal with. All right? So the police officer gets behind their car and puts their blue and red lights on. That driver now recognizes I'm being stopped by the police. That driver's OODA loop has started. I don't want to go back to jail. I'm going to shoot this cop to keep me from having to go to jail. So at that point that their OODA loop starts, they start taking the actions necessary. They grab the gun, right? They get their gun from wherever it is. They pull over. They make the decision. The minute that I see the cop, I'm going to shoot my gun, right? Their OODA loop has started. They've started their actions already. The whole time the police officer is behind them with the blue and the red lights while this person's making the decision that they're going to shoot and kill this cop, the police officer doesn't know that's what the intentions are. We only can react to what that person does. Now we train, we do things over and over again to make sure we're prepared. But ultimately as a police officer, until I get up there on that driver and I recognize they have a gun, that's when my OODA loop starts, right? So I'm not trying to talk about a scary, sad situation, but that's what we tell our officers when we talk about action versus reaction. So that, going back to the active shooter situation again. So now your actions need to give you an advantage. If you act quickly, then you catch them off guard, and now all they can do is react. And that's what we want to do, is force them to react to our actions because we've overwhelmed them so much that they don't have a chance to hurt you. And that's what we want y'all to do in fighting phase. Does anybody have any questions about those two advantages? Okay, I know that was kind of a long description, but the action versus reaction is such a key point in understanding that you can win that fight and not even have to have the gun. That just because they have the gun doesn't mean you can lose. In fact, if we look at some of the history of active shooter incidents, who knows what happens at the Santa Fe High School? A coach used a chair. Did I say anything about a coach pulled a gun? No, he used a chair. What about the Waffle House incident in Nashville? A guy used a door. Shooter comes in, pops up, has an AK-47 rifle. The guy used a door and wedged the gun down at an angle, grabbed the gun, threw it behind the counter, and then fought him. Did I say that somebody in the store pulled a gun? Clint Eastwood made a movie about it. What is it, 15 to Paris or something? Right? A terrorist with a rifle was overwhelmed by 4 people, and they stopped him from killing people. Now, I'm going to acknowledge, I'm not going to say there's no risk. In fact, I want to give full credit to an individual, Mr. Howe. His first name slips my mind right now. University of North Carolina. His story did end tragically, but he's a hero. He charged the shooter. He overwhelmed the shooter with his actions and charged the shooter. Unfortunately, he lost his life, but he saved his class. Again, just because they have the gun doesn't mean they have the advantages. You can go into a fight situation in an active shooter and you can win that fight. Period. Don't think that you can't, because you can. And there's so many examples. If you pay attention, go back on your own, do some research on active shooter stuff if you want, and you will see so many incidents where people it wasn't that the shooter was stopped with guns, they were stopped because somebody, that 13% in that study, fought back, okay? So this is what it could look like, makeshift weapons, right? Look around and see what you got. So outdoors, I added this after the Las Vegas shooting. I watched some survivor testimonies that talked about, when the shooter started, they got down on the ground as low as they could, right? Now, that made me sad because I'm like, gravity still works with bullets, especially from an elevated position. Getting as flat as a sheet of paper is not what it takes to save your life. So I asked myself, what can I do to get people to know what to do in an outdoor situation? And I went back to my military training, what I was taught in the Army. And so the first couple things I want to talk about is, first, is you got to determine where the shots are fired. I'm not going to pass the bullets around like I do in my smaller presentation, but I'm going to explain to you real quick how a bullet works, okay, how guns work. So if you don't know, there's a little silver shell right here. If you can't see it, there's a little silver shell on my hand right here, all right? Inside that shell is a thing called gunpowder. The tip of the bullet is actually the bullet part that comes out of the gun. The back of a bullet is a little circle called the primer. Basically, the way a gun works is when someone pulls that trigger, a firing pin is going to go back, go and strike this primer, and it creates a spark, right? What happens when you introduce a spark to a gunpowder? You have an explosion, right? So it forces the bullet end out the end of the gun. Think of physics, follows the path of least resistance. It follows the gun or out the end of the gun. So when we look at outdoors, one of the first things we want to do is establish where the shots are being fired. Let's think about this. What happens when we have explosions? Because remember, I mentioned it's an explosion basically going off in your hands. What do we get with explosions? What's that? Kickback? Okay. Do we get loud noises? Like boom, right? So we hear shots. We're outside, we hear shots, a loud boom over here. Explosion, right? What is something else that happens with explosions? Smoke? What'd you say? Echo? Okay, that could affect the building, but let's bring it to like just an explosion in general. So we have the loud boom. We're going to have smoke, right? Because of an explosion happened in their hand. And then, oh, by the way, with explosions, do we get like fire, flame? So there's a little thing called muzzle flash. Just like the bullet, it follows the path of least resistance. The flames are going to come out the end of that gun. Now, in daytime, it's not going to be as obvious. At nighttime, you can't miss it. It's called muzzle flash. You're going to hear, you're standing here, boom, you hear shots. You look that direction, you hear another shot. Now you see a flash, you see smoke. And by the way, the faster they shoot the gun, the more flashing and more smoke you see. So while you're outdoors, you're going to establish where the shots are coming from. Oh my God, I see muzzle flash, I see smoke, I hear a loud boom over here. The shooter's that direction. So you do this quick, just like the fighting. This is all happening fast. So you've established where the shots are going to come from. The next thing you have to establish is, am I in the kill zone? Right? You're going to know you're in the kill zone because if you're standing next to people and they're falling to the ground after the explosions, the boom sounds, that means you're in the target of the shooter. The shooter's looking in your direction. Even if you don't see someone fall to the ground, if you see ricochets, things that randomly exploding around you, it means you're where the shooter is shooting at. And that's not where we want you to be. So we're outdoors, I hear gunshots, I look, I see the smoke, the muzzle flash, wherever over here. I recognize that I'm in the danger zone, the immediate danger zone. So the next thing I want to do real quickly is I want to identify where I can run to. And I want to run to cover and concealment. Cover basically will protect you from bullets, right? Like if you're outdoors, we're looking at our big heavy trees. We're looking at our concrete walls. We're looking at an engine block. An engine block's made of steel. If you get on the other side of an engine block, that steel is going to take the bullets for you. So in the best of both worlds, we get cover and concealment. We can run to a location away from the shooter, because I'm going to use the example, let's say the shooter's over here. I'm not going to run towards the shooter. I'm going to run away from the shooter. I'm going to say that, let's say there's a big car over here. I'm going to run to this big car or this big tree, and I'm going to get behind them. Now, you're not always going to be able to find that big heavy brick wall or something like that that's going to be cover. They're not always going to be something for you to run to right away. So the next best thing is, if you can't have cover and concealment, is to at least accept that you can run to concealment. In the Las Vegas shooting, there was a young lady who said her and her friends hid inside of some bushes for about 3 hours until the police showed up and escorted them out. Right? The violence was already over, but they didn't want to move until they were escorted out. Why did the shooter shoot at that bush? Because I can promise you, if he had, bullets would go right into that bush. Why didn't he shoot at it? He didn't see them to shoot at. So again, we're outdoors, we can't maybe get to cover, then if the best we can do is run to hide ourselves from the view of the shooter, then that's what we want to do. Run and hide behind something. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to go, unlike that young lady, I'm not going to suggest that you go there for 3 hours, right? I'm going to suggest you get to there immediately, start evaluating what other locations that might offer you a better security, and start trying to figure out, like, okay, can I get away from the shooter without them seeing me or hurting me? And if the answer is yes, you're going to go from that immediate safe location to a safer location, right? So, and if there is no way for you to get away from the shooter, then it is what it is. The best you can do is just hide or stay behind that cover until you can go. But I don't want you to think that you're going to go there and just wait forever, because you might need to escape again. You might recognize that the shooter's all the way over here, and while you're hiding behind here, you can kind of look around the corner and you can see that they walk behind that curtain, let's say. Now we want to get up and run out to the door, right? Think of things like this. And obviously, this is for outdoors, to be clear.
UNT 911.
So once you get to a safe location, make that phone call to 911. Understand that 911 phone call could be the difference between saving lives or not. Don't assume that the police know. We may not know what's going on. Your call could be the call that gets to us to tell us there's an active shooter inside this location. We need to get officers to the scene. These are some of the questions they may ask you. Just understand that if you don't know the answer, then you don't know the answer, okay? We don't want you to leave the safety of a location to go try to get us the answer. Just answer the questions you can answer. Now, this next part talks about a shooter's description, but the reality is this description is what we would want you to use in all the suspicious person's descriptions. Again, this is how you describe somebody that you want the police to contact. So first of all, start off with the tall, short, race, and the sex. So I'm going to use myself as an example. For a moment, imagine I'm not in a police uniform, because hopefully you're not calling the cops on the cops. And for the record, that has happened to me. On a traffic stop, she called 911 to call the police on me. So that's a funny story for later. Anyways, so back on the training, tall, white male, right? That's pretty simple. Now it gets even easier. You're just going to follow a head to toe description principle. Two things happen when you follow this. One, you're less likely to miss details that matter. And two, it helps us as we're responding to the scene to get the mental picture of what we're looking for. Imagine if I sat there and said, gray hair, black boots, blue shirt, black pants, wearing a black watch. Can you get a mental picture off of that? No. But if we follow the head to toe principle, salt and pepper hair. If I had glasses or facial hair, you could mention those things that you follow down. Yeah, he was wearing a blue shirt, had some shiny stuff on there. You don't need to know what it is, just shiny stuff on his shirt. Weight, since I'm describing myself, I'm going to continue to use Studley. I'm supposed to laugh at that. No, I'm just kidding. So, guns. I appreciate you gun nuts that know I'm carrying a Glock 17 9mm, right? That's great. I love gun nuts. Not really. All right. But the truth is all I really need to know, was it a long gun or a short gun, and what color? So you could say a black short gun. That's enough information for us to build on, okay? Dark navy pants and black boots. You use that description principle when you describe things, you're less likely to hurt us, and we can use those information, okay? So that's how you describe things, describe people. All right, so let's talk about when the police arrive on the scene. So the first things I'm going to make sure you're clear on is that we are taught very early in our careers that hands are what are going to hurt us, right? Whether a hand's got a gun, a knife, a bat, whatever it is, it starts with their hands. So one of the first things we're going to be looking for in a moment like this is what's in that person's hands. So I'm going to set my clicker down to make sure I don't cause any confusion in the moments, because we want to make sure our hands are completely empty. Your fingers are spread and your hands are out in the open. I'm not saying you got to be like this. That's uncomfortable. Nobody wants to do that for a period of time. If the police are coming and you're coming down the hall, you can comfortably relax your arms like this and approach us from this view. Imagine you're running to shots fired, right? Imagine that you're trying to go take out a shooter and someone's walking down the hallway with their hands down here, or like this, or this. Which one's going to make you feel a little bit uncomfortable versus that, right? This tells me you're not my immediate threat. Now, I'm not going to say we're going to be fishing buddies and go out and drink some beers later, right? All right? I'm just telling you that at that moment, when your hands are clearly empty, I recognize that you're not my threat, okay? So that's why that's important, all right? We want you to remain calm and follow our directions. I talk about this kind of in perspective, and I'm going to tell you all this. I'm not for bragging rights or anything like that, but I want you all to keep a couple things in perspective. I understand that my purpose on this earth is to be a protector guardian. I kind of mentioned that earlier. I don't know anybody in here, but I came to terms a long time ago that if it's necessary for me to lay my life down to save somebody else's life, that is my job. I'm a protector of the innocent. That's what I will do. But in this moment, it doesn't mean that I'm not going through my own things, right? So that's why following our directions parts is important. Like, I have 3 children. My daughter's 19. She's in college right now. I can't wait to see my other two grow up. I have a wife of 21 years. I have things like this. I'm not saying that I'm an emotional wreck, but what I'm saying is in that moment, things are pretty intense for me, and I'm asking you to just have some faith and trust me that whatever I'm asking you to do, to just do the things you can to help me and make things a little bit easier, okay? I always throw out this hypothetical situation. I mean, what if my instructions are screaming at you to get on the ground? I don't need you to argue with me that, hey, I'm not the shooter. Why are you yelling at me? Stop telling me to get on the ground. Think about it this way. What if the shooter's between you and me? Do you think the shooter will shoot through you to get to me? Yeah. Do you think I'm going to shoot through you to get to the shooter? No. I'm not going to risk your life like that. So my instructions may be as crazy as get on the ground, but what you don't recognize is what I know in the end. I just need you to follow my directions and have faith in me that I'm trying to keep everybody safe, okay? So that part's important. The other part is keeping in mind that we will be going through adrenaline and we'll have tunnel vision. To put in perspective what I like to talk about this one for tunnel vision. Has anybody ever sped down the highway? Okay, thanks. Can I see you with your driver's license at the end of this? No, I'm just kidding. So I'm going to own it, y'all. I've sped on the highway too, okay? To be clear, I'm an ethical police officer. I am not a ticket writing cop, so I think there's balance that I've sped on the highway too, because I'm more likely to cut you a break than I am to write that ticket, okay? So let's put it this way. I always like to describe this scenario to help you think about a tunnel vision that officers could be going through. So let's say you're driving down the highway on your way to work or on your way to class. You left work early, you're doing good on time, and you're taking in, you're like, hey, look, there's a shopping mall. Look, there's a new restaurant. I mean, we're Texas. What else do we look at around here, right? So you're looking at all that stuff, and now you look at the clock, and you recognize you're running late, right? You're like, oh my God, I'm going to be late. I need to speed and hurry up and get there, right? And again, speed's bad. Don't do it. But let's say you speed, and as you're picking up your speed to get to work on time or class on time, do you care about the shopping malls and the restaurants on your side? Or do you only care about those cars in front of you and how you're getting around them, right? That's what we're talking about when I talk about our tunnel vision. My world's not this big. My world's this big. I care about that car or that person in front of me and whether they're my threat or not, okay? So help us out, and again, follow directions. Understand that that's the emotions we're going through. Those are the things that our world's not big, it's small, and don't run up on our blind side. Don't do things like that because all that stuff puts everybody at risk, okay? I understand that our primary objective is to illuminate the threat. That's what we want to do. The quicker, don't stop us, the quicker we get there to take out the shooter or stop the shooter, we'll say, the more lives we can potentially save, okay? We could be responding individually. We could be responding in a team. There could be people in civilian tires. Some of y'all have probably seen, like, we wear polos too. Like office folks like me that normally don't work patrol don't have to always wear this. I could be running in with a police polo, all right? That could be what you could see. Doesn't mean that I'm a threat. It just means I'm a cop in a different uniform. Okay? So stopping the bleed, I'm going to talk about two key ways. Now this is after maybe we've determined that the shooting has stopped. Let's say UNT PD has sent out some message that says the shooter has been stopped, remained in position, a place until properly escorted out. Because we want to make sure there's no threats to you. And you have that one person next to you that's bleeding. This is that point in the phase that you could maybe help save their life, right? It's not that you were running out and you stopped to treat somebody. It's the violence is over and we're here. So there's two key ways to do this. First of all, there's the direct pressure, all right? Basically take a shirt, a jacket, a sock, whatever you got, and you're going to wad it up as tight as you can. You'll put it over the gunshot, and you're just going to put all the pressure you can down on it to basically slow the bleeding. I laugh, and this isn't taking a shot at them, but they have somebody that teaches an official stop the bleeding. And then one of the first things he says was make sure you get a sterile shirt. Not knocking what he's saying. He's right. But I want to let you know in this moment, I'm not worried about a sterile shirt, especially if I'm the shot person. I don't care if you get a dirty t-shirt. Stop the bleeding, wad it up, put it on there, okay? Don't get caught up in that sterile stuff. Not trying to take away from the training because it does matter, but in the moment I'll fight an infection later versus I bled to death, okay? So find that cloth and try to hold it over the wound. That's what direct pressure is. The other route is tourniquet. Now this is an official looking tourniquet. Keep in mind things like belts, shoelaces, ropes, things that can basically be wound up tight can also be used for tourniquets. Now you need to know that tourniquets can only work on basically the limbs, okay? If I'm shot in my chest, you can't wrap a tourniquet around my neck and expect it to stop the bleeding, okay? That creates new problems. That's not what we're talking about here, all right? So let's pretend that I've been shot in this leg. Basically what we're going to do is just a little bit above that gunshot, about 1 inch to 2 inches above the gunshot, we're going to take whatever we're using for a tourniquet, we're going to wrap it around there between the gunshot and my heart, because we're trying to basically stop the blood bleeding. You're going to wrap it super, super, super tight to like literally you are trying to cut off the circulation. Okay, that's what we want to do. We want to stop the blood from coming out of my heart, out of the wound, by stopping the blood flow from even getting there. And that's basically what a tourniquet does. Now, the next part you're going to do is, if you got a Sharpie, pen, whatever, is you're going to put T equals the time on their forehead. And here's goes back to my military training. If you don't have a Sharpie, you can always dip your finger in the blood and write T equals, all right? And here's the reason the time matters. A tourniquet can't stay on there forever. It just can't. Eventually, it's going to reach a point that the leg's got to go, okay? So in this scenario, let's say it's been on there beyond that time. We don't want the doctor spending a lot of unnecessary time trying to save my leg when it's been beyond the time that it can be saved. We want them to go ahead and worry about saving my life. So that's why you put the time on there, so the doctors and the medical staff can recognize it's beyond the time that we can save the leg. We need to take the leg and save the life. And that's what the time on the forehead's about, okay? So prevention, the new stuff. I really would love to hear feedback on this for the record, all right? So let's talk about target location. Understand that virtually all these targets are premeditated rather than impulsive. People have this idea, especially when campus carry came into play, that people were just going to show up, get mad one day, and pull their gun in the middle of a class or work. Based on the reports and stuff I'm reading, that's not the reality, okay? It's not an impulsive thing. It's something that they've thought through, and we'll talk about a little bit more about how they get to that point. Forethought really does go into their target selection, okay? They think it through. Most offenders do not threaten the target directly prior to the incident. That's just not what this plays out to be, okay? So recognizing the behavior. Remember I talked to you all about that. There is no profile for an active shooter. There is not, okay? I'm going to tell you it's about the person. It's behavior. The behavior is the key. So first of all, normally you have an outgoing person that starts to pull away, right? They're going through some life trauma effects. They're failing classes, mom and dad are pulling funding, they're getting a divorce, bankruptcy, whatever it is. They're normally an outgoing person, and at this point in their life, they feel like they're the victim in everything. And they start to pull away from stuff. That's a clue in that behavior. We already talked about that has an abnormal stress life event. So they make a statement that would be interpreted by a reasonable person to be threatening or intimidating, right? Like they're trying, that's one of the things in that report that I read is shooters tend to want to intimidate others, right? And they're kind of manipulative in the process before the shooting. They become fixated on a hate group, a terrorist, or an extremist material, all right? Somebody that you know that normally isn't into, I don't want to sing out any hate groups, but let's just say they start getting fixated on a hate group, right? And you know, like, that's not normal. That's not a normal, healthy behavior for the person. You should start asking yourself, what's this about, right? Statements and behavior indicating suicidality, right? This was an interesting stat that I read in that report. 81% of the school shooting cases, the offender told at least one person that they were thinking about doing it. They tipped their hat to at least 81%. 59% to two people. So it may not be they're going to come out right away, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on another slide, and say, hey, I'm going to go to school and shoot tomorrow. But they may make some subtle statement that you should recognize as that's not a normal statement. That's not an okay statement to make. And now you should start putting this stuff together, okay? So prevention, the person of the concern. Who are we talking about? Who is the shooter? Who are they seeing that are the shooters? Well, we're talking about basically somebody that has a poor strength of coping mechanism. They can't handle things, right? They don't cope with normal stress or stress in a normal, healthy way. Attitudes about self, very narcissistic, entitled, injustice, or an injustice collector. I'm going to stand up for the people that are being suppressed for this, right? And they feel like it's their responsibility to stand up for them. These are the people that we're watching for. Needs for attention, right? They want recognition or notoriety. I said that wrong. Response to rules and authority. How do they respond when they're told what to do by an authority, right? Preoccupation with violence. People start becoming obsessed with violent type stuff, video games, movies, actual real world incidents. Like they can't get enough of that violence that's happening around them, and they're becoming violent junkies. Those are all qualities to look for. Deceptiveness and manipulative, right? They will play games with people to try to see if they can manipulate them. This is the qualities of the person of concern. These are the type of people we want to walk for. I want to be clear though, I don't want y'all to get so caught up in one bullet and one bullet alone. It is the totality of it. It's multiple things that could be occurring, multiple qualities that start to kind of draw attention to this person that we want you to pay attention to, okay? So, a little bit more. Offenders intending to engage targets attack generally move along an identifiable pathway. We'll talk about that pathway here on the next slide. The first step often depends on a personal grievance or humiliation based on, goes back to that injustice, that they feel that they are being a victim in some circumstances where at the end of the day, a rational, reasonable person would know you're not the victim, you just want to be the victim, right? You feel like you're a victim, but that's not, it's your fault. You did this to yourself. You're not really a victim, okay? So some of the motives for these people are motives, revenge or perceived grievances. It's going to be a quest for justice. Again, remember, they're the injustice collector. They want to speak up for the suppressed or the innocent or whatever it is. Look at the El Paso shooter. He felt like he needed to attack immigrants, right? He was being an injustice collector. Same thing with the Odessa, right? He wouldn't attack immigrants, but he felt he was he was the victim in life. And that's what he was doing. He needed to collect on his justice. Desire for, again, notoriety or recognition. Desire to solve a problem perceived to be unbearable, or a desire to kill or be killed. These are all motives behind these shooters that push them to go doing what they do. So let's talk about that pathway. Grievance, right? Remember, whatever it is, they may play the victim. I have a grievance on this particular topic, even though most people are like, this is something you did to yourself, right? So the grievance part. The ideation, the fixated with a hate group, the person they want to blame for their misfortunes in life, the people they want to say that this is the reason this is happening to me. The next pathway is the research and planning phase, right? They start looking into those violent situations. They start to become fixated on them. They start looking into figuring out where they can go to get away with shootings. Preparation, right? One of the things I read in this report that was fascinating, they didn't identify what shooting it was, but one of the shooters that survived and gave himself up, his grievance was with his boss, his employer. And he was upset because he felt like his employers weren't treating him fair, right? So and he worked for a retail chain. And so what he decided to do was he wanted to test how much he could get away with when preparing for this active shooter. So he started showing up to work with a duffel bag. The duffel bag was empty of stuff that would be illegal or harmful, but he showed up to the duffel bag every day for several weeks, just to see if somebody would say, hey, why do you have a duffel bag? And nobody confronted him on that. So the day of the shooting, guess what he did? He loaded his duffel bag up with guns, and at this point he knew nobody was going to challenge him for carrying a duffel bag, and he showed up to his job with a gun and started the shooting, right? So that's that preparation, that research and planning, right? Then there's going to be the breach, where they're going to violate some space that they're not supposed to. They're going to cross that line they're not supposed to cross, right? And then, of course, the attack. So this is the pathway identified, again, through the report from the Department of Justice. This is the pathway that they follow. It doesn't just start off with okay, today's my day, I'm going to shoot. They actually put thought into it. They follow this path. So we want to pay attention to people that look like they could be following this path. Same thing with look at the El Paso shooter. His mom called the Allen Police Department a few weeks before. He was basically in the research kind of preparation phase at that point because he bought a gun that he normally wouldn't buy, right? So he was in that phase. Mom recognized that. Why does he have a gun? He doesn't need this gun. And she contacted the police. So again, pay attention to this pathway. So additional prevention stuff is the electronics threats, the communications. You always want to consider the context in which you're seeing these communications, right? I read one last week, not saying that it was okay, but they were frustrated over a situation. They didn't say they were going to come out and hurt anybody, but they made a reference to a violent situation. Now, I'm not saying like that's one we paid attention to, but sometimes you got to step back and look at that context. Like, why are they saying that? Because I've seen some electronic communications where the person just made a dumb statement and they didn't really, I'm not saying it makes it okay to make those statements, but it doesn't mean they're a threat to an active shooter. It's just in an angry moment, they said that, I wish you were dead. I'm not saying that that's okay again, but it's an example of we got to be contextual about why are they making this statement, okay? Intensity and effort to focus, observe pattern of communications. Like they kind of isolate in on some specific topics, right? some specific things. Evidence of personal motives by a threatener, and then justification for violence. All these things are things that you would consider you would see in those electronic communications. Leakage, that was one of the big things that 81% goes into this. That's what they did, is that leakage is that statements that may not come out and say, I'm going to go be an active shooter, but a statement that makes you go, that's not a normal statement to make, right? And they usually make it to somebody that they think they can trust. So statements like, if I had a gun on me, they'd be sorry. That's not a normal, healthy statement. They make that statement that's in a clue like, hey, we need to pay attention. I'm going to kill my classmate tomorrow, right? That's pretty direct. This one's one that actually was a real one that came out of the report. Don't come to school tomorrow, but watch the news, right? That's a clue that this person is already kind of taking up this idea that violence is okay and that they're going to cause harm, okay? So for what those of y'all don't know, we have an organization here on UNT called the Care Team. Care Team is designed to help those students that we recognize that may be in some kind of trouble and or that we recognize that may be a threat to our safety or the safety of our community. This works for staff, faculty, and students. I can tell you that in my career, I've had students that I have made contact with, and I'm like, I will never forget who you are because you just look like you could be a potential active shooter. We referred them over to the Care Team. Care Team got involved, helped them through counseling and testing assistance, helped them through it, and by the time I see them the next time, I don't even recognize them because they got to the right people that could help them through that life crisis, help them through what was going on, and they own that, hey, look, I recognize that that was not a good behavior, and I just was really going through a hard time, but I'm much better now. Like this is what the Care Team can do. The other idea behind the Care Team is a lot of people don't know this about the Virginia Tech shooting, but the police department had clues that the guy was a potential shooter. The university had signs, and then multiple departments basically within the university all knew that the signs were there that the shooter in Virginia Tech was a potential threat. The problem was the departments weren't communicating about what they knew. So the Care Team's other responsibility, besides getting people to the help that they need, is to make sure that all the departments that matter, in the case of UNT, the police department, counseling and testing, housing, the dean of students office, I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody, all work together and review files every week? Every Monday? Pretty much every week. They review everything from last week to make sure all departments that need to know are informed and so that decisions can be made to protect the community. So that's one of the things the Care Team does to help make sure we're safe. We're almost done, folks. So target hardening. Basically, I'm certified in a program called CPTED, stands for Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. In this program, they don't really address what to do about protecting your environment from an active shooter. So I took my knowledge on active shooter and took my knowledge on this and kind of combined them to create what I think could help. So first of all, surveillance. Understand that surveillance doesn't necessarily mean camera, mechanical surveillance. Surveillance can be just your natural ability with your eyes to see things. Does anybody want to take ownership of being like a relative to a cop or anything like that? You go out to eat or something? Nobody wants to own being a cop. Okay, you do. All right, where do they sit every time that you go out to eat? Facing the door. Why do you think we do that? Because we want to recognize the danger before the danger recognizes us. So let's take it to your classroom or take it to your work environment, okay? Where do you put yourself? So can you see a danger coming before the danger sees you? If the answer is no, can you do something to fix that? I had one person that did a recommendation, like their desk was where it was. They couldn't move it so that they could see the door. So they are like, hey, why don't I put a mirror up on my cubicle so I can at least look in my mirror and see what's going on behind me? I'm like, genius. Such a simple solution. I don't know if anybody in here has been in my classes. I'm going back to finish my degree, but I'm getting older now, so I can't see things very well, and I like to sit up front so I can see the screen. But as a cop, it makes me nervous. Everybody's behind me. So all class, if people pay attention to me, I'm like this. Right? So you may not always be able to sit in the back of the class, like in my case, but at least stay alert to your surroundings. Stay aware, look over your shoulders, and pay attention to what's going on around you, okay? That's what surveillance is. Now, access control, it's in the description. Creating a situation where people that are not authorized to be in our space don't come into our space. Housing has front desk. It could be an electronic swipe access. It could be, it could be that whatever it is, that you keep people that aren't supposed to be in the space from getting into our space. That's what access control is. So do things to keep people out, basically, right? Territorial reinforcement. Basically what this is establishing like this is your space to stand in and this is my space. And if they come into my space, then I know something's not right. And the best way I can describe this is I think of a grocery store. All right, anybody in here ever go grocery shopping? Like Walmart, Kroger's, anything like that, right? Okay, right, exactly. All right, so when you go pushing up your cart and you load your grocery bills up on the conveyor belt, do any of y'all ever walk around the conveyor belt and go stand next to the cashier while they check out? Anybody ever do that? Why not? There are literally no rules. There are no rules that say we can't do that, right? But what have they done to make sure that you know that this is your space and that space? Well, there's room for your shopping cart here, right? The checkout, you can see what the things are ringing up from this end. You can swipe your cards from this end. And what do you think that cashier would do if you walked around the belt and went and stood next to the person? What do you think that cashier is going to do? They're not going to keep checking you out. They're going to stop and be like, what is going on? Am I in danger? Right? That's what territorial reinforcement's about. Can you do something about your workspace or your personal space or your classroom space that establishes that if you're staying here, you're okay, but the minute you come over into my space, I'm going to perceive this as a danger and a threat, and now I know I need to take some kind of action instead of waiting for you to hurt me. So again, think about that way. Think about things in your environment where you can say like, yeah, sure, stand right here, but over here is my space. Another way to look at it is look at your houses, right? People can walk down the sidewalk all day long, but if they step up into your yard and start walking through your grass, are you not like, excuse me, hello, right? That's what I'm talking about with territorial reinforcement. Procedures, have open door meetings as much as you can. I understand sometimes that's just not an option. I like to encourage people that if you have to have a meeting with somebody, that if you can't have an open door meeting, because imagine like the door's being shut, and now you are one-on-one, and they jump up and punch you in the face and knock you out. Who's there to call the police for help? What if you just scream for help? Help, 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 but the door's shut, nobody can hear that you need help. So if you have to have meetings with people, like I said, open door may not be an option, but that's where I encourage you to at least have a 2-to-1 ratio. So that way, not only do you have a potential witness who could call the police if you need help, you have somebody that can help defend you if you need to, right? So I encourage to have that. Always have a 2-to-1 ratio in your meetings, okay? Restrict access to personal bags. Now, I'm not suggesting that we tell people, like if we have to meet with, like, let's say a student or a staff member that we have to have that unpleasant conversation with. I'm not saying that we leave their bags like out where they can be stolen. But let's say we bring them into an office environment and we tell them to say, hey, can you set your bag over here in the corner? And then they come and sit down with you at your desk. And while you're talking to them at the desk, it gets heated up. They get angry and they jump up and they run over to that bag. Are you going to just sit there and be like, okay, it's fine? No, it's a clue to you like, hey, is this escalating? So now, but what if we don't have that bag over there? We let the bag sit at their feet and they get angry and they reach in. And again, we know based on the studies, it's not going to be, it's more likely it's premeditated, but let's just talk worst case scenario. They reach in there and pull a gun out and they never jumped up. There was no time for you to react, right? So I encourage you in those kind of meetings, can you sit your bag in the corner? Come sit over here. Make sure they can still see it, just don't let them have it down at their feet, where you can't see what's going on. And then obviously, if you have to have meetings with people that you feel like are high risk, like this is going to be a meeting that's going to result in a lot of hurt feelings and a lot of yelling and a lot of potential threats to my safety, you can notify the police. We have 3 different types of standbys that we can come do. One, where we're in full uniform. We won't sit in your meeting, to be clear. We just stand outside your meeting, but we can respond in this kind of uniform and be visible in the lobby like we're there, like, hey, how's it going, right? We have one where, again, like a soft approach where I wear the polo, like I mentioned, and we just kind of sit there quietly or hang out in case you scream for help, we're there. And then, of course, we have the route where we try to pretend like we're a student. I love one time they sent me and they're like, hey, Crawford, go pretend to be a college student while they fire this faculty member. And I'm like, so I'm an old man with the earbud, like, trying to pretend like I'm a college student. But the truth is I was there in case the faculty member lost his mind and started screaming and yelling and threatening. There was no need for the police response because we are to be called because I could already run in there, right? So we offer that service for those high-risk persons, okay? A couple safety tips, and then we can finish up just about everything. Again, we've talked about on the always know 2 potential exits. Be paying attention. How could I escape if I had to escape now? Report all suspicious people to the UNT Police Department. So many crimes can happen on this campus where if we had just gotten a phone call with good information and gotten it in a quick manner, we could have potentially prevented a crime from happening again or caught the criminal or something like that. Literally had somebody reach out to me about a week ago, send me an email asking me at what point should I call the police? And I'm like, about that point that you asked yourself, when should I call the police, right? Because if that question enters your mind, it's time to call the police, okay? So be mindful of that. Whether you're coming to class, work, whatever, take ownership for your environment. Know where you're at, know your surrounding, know what a normal day would be like, so when the abnormal happens, your instincts can go, that's different, should I be doing something? And then what if all day? What if y'all leave right here and there is an active shooter inside the Union building? Basically, we tell our officers to do that because it goes back to that OODA loop thing. If you can what if, that's how we help tell our officers to speed up the reaction, is if you already what if this happens, when it does happen, you're not spinning like, okay, shock moment, nah, okay, now I can go. You're already thinking through this, so that way you can speed up that reaction time. All right? Eagle Alert is one of the most likely way in an active shooter event that we will notify y'all. Just to kind of tell you how much this university cares about your safety and us investing in it. The old system, basically the way it would work is if we had an active shooter that happened on campus, let's say my officer would respond, right? They'd get to the scene. Then I as a supervisor would be notified that we had an active shooter incident. Then I as a supervisor would notify as the highest ranking person at the police department, we have an active shooter incident. The highest ranking in the police department would notify the university's communications relations or university communications department, who would release the Eagle Alert out. The average time to get all those messages out was about 8 minutes. So the shooting was probably already over. So as a university, we recognized like that's not good enough. And because safety matters to us, we invested in a new system. We invested in a system called the alert, or this alert system. Basically what happens is, and we at the police department changed our process. My officer gets to the scene, and I'm going to keep it simple. There's a little other factors that can speed it up even more, but let's just go. My officer gets to the scene, tells me on the radio there's an active shooter, right? I as a supervisor can immediately make the decision, hit the active threat button, and this pre-programmed message goes out. And we went from the average message getting out in 8 minutes to the average message getting out under 2 minutes. So we sped up that process to get that message out. So that's one of the things that we've done to increase it. As you can see, there's multiple different little themes. Now these are pre-programmed messages, and the active threat message that first comes out is not going to tell you active shooter inside the Union building. It's just going to tell you active threat has been reported on the UNT campus, consider your run, hide, fight options, and stay tuned for further information, right? But it's just the initial notification to give you a heads up that this is happening. All right, that is it. David, can I get a favor? You want to come up here? We're going to ask questions. If anybody needs to go, we're at 4:26. So I had it scheduled for 5 because I wanted to allow time for questions. If y'all don't know me, I love questions. It's my favorite part of presenting. I'm going to have David grab a mic and then go around. Is the mic up here or up there? Okay. Sorry, there was a mic here earlier. I guess it got moved. In the meantime, let's see if I can hear your questions, and I'll repeat them until we get a mic. All right, who's got questions? Oh, this always makes me sad. It's that awkward. Oh, yay! What do you got? Yes. Wow. I wish you'd stuck with what's my favorite donut. That one's easier. I would say yes. I will tell you that a couple things to keep in mind. I'm not the installer expert. I'm looking at emergency management because they're basically one of the ones that helped bring this here. She's saying yes. I feel confident because even in a power outage, the UNT Police Department has power because we have an independent generator. So even if it was affected by power, the UNT Police Department will work.
We are a backup as well, so we back each other up on these buttons. We have 2 different sets of them, and we're also on a backup generator as well. So we also have power when the power goes out.
Yeah, and it's not like it's like, oh, 5 minutes, let's get the generator on. No, it's like the power gets cut off, the generator kicks on like that. So it shouldn't be an issue. So yeah, they have the exact same setup there. Matter of fact, the picture was theirs, and then Officer Causey said our buttons look better, so we changed them out, the photo. All right, next question. David's got the mic to bring y'all. If you don't want to ask the mic, all right, right over there. Seriously, y'all, I love questions. Please, if this is the chance to ask it. I'll make sure y'all have my email, though, of course, because I know it's intimidating to ask questions in front of everybody. So I will be over here afterwards, and you can send me an email for your questions. Yes, sir.
Thanks. In my building, on my floor where my office is, the only alternative exit from the front is in the back, but it has a delay on the ability to open.
It's One of those delayed alarms that you have to hold it down for a period of time.
Sounds like a bad idea.
So it kind of, first thing I would say it there and say, I don't know what the reason for that particular door having that on there, but I want to bring things back into perspective. I can sit here and talk about active shooter all day long, but we're also have multiple things we need to worry about, other things that could be occurring. So again, I don't know what the motivation for that particular door is being that way, but I go back to that stat where it's not as likely as you might think to happen at the university. So we can't, if I had my way when I talk about campus security, I'd put razor wire up around the campus, y'all, and gun towers just to make sure everybody here stays safe. That's not practical to the operation of the university. So I don't know why that alarm's there, but I wouldn't suggest removing it because it's got a purpose. As far as the only exit out, it's an unfortunate situation, but it is what it is. So it might be that escaping is not the best option for you. It might be that hiding is your best option. So, or removing yourself from that office to the next office that's better or something like that. It's the best I can advise you. Does that help any?
Not much, but okay.
Okay, well, it's worth a shot. If you want to at the end, give me your information and I'll be more than willing to come take a look and find out a little bit more about it. But without knowing why that alarm's on there, without actually seeing the environment, I can't tell you, yes, this is it. And to be honest, I wouldn't do that anyways because I want you to understand that it's an evolving situation. So, great question though. Yes?
Are our windows shatterproof or does it depend on the building?
I think it depends on the building. I will tell you most of your exterior windows are double pane. They're not going to be easy to break. I've heard different points of view. There's like little devices you can buy for like $5 that you put up and it shatters glass. And I've been told double pane won't work. I've been told, yes, it will work on double pane. That's one of those manufacturer questions. If you want to go buy that device for your own, like it's good for officers a lot of times carry them for car windows and stuff like that. But they have them out there that should shatter glass. You can always research the owner. Some are though, they're tempered glass. So. All right, anybody else? Right over here.
So I look at these buttons. So if you use the lockdown message, what does that message look like? What's the protocol?
So the best idea that I can think of like a lockdown where it might be would be, I'm thinking of like, there could be a bomb. No, I don't say a bomb. It just depends on the scenario, like a gas leak, something like that. A protest, something where we don't want to draw a bunch of people to the crowd. Does that make sense? Like we want you to stay where you're at because of the situation. So it could be like she mentioned protest. I'm trying to remember what exactly is on the mention. We've got the little list. I can't read this photo, but there is some specific list for that. But we wouldn't necessarily put an active threat. We're going to hit the active threat. That's no doubt about it because we don't want someone to lock down if locking down could put them at risk.
Potential violence is the description on that one.
Yeah, potential for violence. Okay. You can actually read that? Mad props, Julie. All right, next. All right, well, one last chance. I don't even care if, again, seriously, you could ask me what my favorite donut is. Nothing's off limits here. Yes, right there. Thank you. I'm seriously, I love questions, y'all. All right, so a lot of people probably already know this. I've been doing this for a while. It's a sprinkle donut. I am a simpleton, and something about these shiny, flashy colors just keeps drawing my attention to the sprinkle donuts. So, what's that? I'm more of a glazed guy, but if it's got sprinkles on it, chances are I'm willing to eat it. But I will say it was kind of hard. Some of y'all who've known me for a while, I've recently lost about 90 pounds. And one of the things to do that was to cut the donuts out of the diet a little bit. But now, fortunately, I still have my Sundays before church. I give in on every Sunday, 2 sprinkled donuts. So, question over there? Yes.
How often, here at this university, has there ever been a situation where they've got threats, where you've ever had to send out an active threat? And what was the situation? How did you guys resolve it?
So a potential threat, I don't have numbers like that off my head. I'm not going to tell you that there's never been a situation where we've paid a little closer attention to. But we take all the steps necessary to ensure that when we recognize those threats or dangers that exist, we do everything we can to make sure that threat doesn't turn into a real threat. Times that we've actually ever had to hit the active threat button, I can think of none. Because there's just, again, it goes back to the statistics. I'm not saying it's impossible. We plan for the worst and hope for the best. But it's not likely to happen as well. So there's just not a lot happening on that particular front. Yes, ma'am.
If a group of you are going to leave a classroom
Mm-hmm.
and try to get out of the building, you're not supposed to take anything.
Yeah, just go.
But I would think in case you encounter somebody, you might take everybody grab a book to throw at the shooter.
And you could. My main reason why we mentioned that point is I don't want, like, I have a chance to get out of the room, but then I turn around and I leave. I delay myself and run to go gather, find that perfect item I want to grab. I'd rather people just be like, I need to get out and just go and not worry about trying to run back. That's why we say don't bring belongings. It goes to, you may not, that's kind of the unfortunate situation. One, I wouldn't consider evacuating if there is that, again, we don't want to be targets of opportunity. If you think you have information that, hey, the shooter, I could run into the shooter and we need to grab something to prepare ourselves, well, then maybe we just need to hide and not run. Because at that point, like, if there's that kind of threat that we could run the shooter, let's just not go. Let's just hide down. The other part, though, to keep that in mind is that if you were to be evacuating for some reason, the decision was made as a classroom to evacuate and you run the shooter, it's, charge them. I mean, it's the violence that's found its way here. It's unfortunate we don't have anything to distract them with, but at this point, that's where you're just going to rely on your attackers to overwhelm them with your actions. So, okay? Yes, sir, and I'll get to you.
What is the response time that your department has right now for any location on the campus?
That's a good question. So the last time I looked, we had different response times based on the priority. Priority 1 calls are basically those calls to hurry up and get on scene. I don't hold my feet to the fire because I haven't audited those in a little while, but it's pretty much under about 2.5 minutes is the time from the time that the call comes in to the time that we are on scene. So that's the last time I looked at it, that's basically where our priority 1 calls were at. So, and that's just an average. Obviously, sometimes we could be right there, like, I'm here, and go in. Question? Yes, ma'am. So there's different phases in this, and I actually was thinking about, I should have mentioned this, so thank you for asking this question. So the first phase is obviously going to be the phase where we want to get as many officers as we can on scene to stop the threat. The quicker we stop the threat, the more lives we can potentially save. Once we've established that there are the threats either, and like I said, all this happens very fast, and the way it's going to work in the real world is as soon as the majority of the officers get there, they stop the threat hopefully pretty quick. The next phase is that we start to work in the fire department, and we start to escort the fire department in. And the reason I'm glad you asked this question is I don't know if y'all follow us on Facebook or Twitter, but recently we started collaborating with the Denton Fire Department, and we did some training that covered just exactly that. When we do, y'all need to know that when we do our active shooter training from a police officer standpoint, we do at least 2 specific active shooter focused training events, at least 2 a year. Okay, this one was a bonus one for us. And when we did this scenario, it involved the person. It involved using what we call, like, basically simunitions, fake, soap-filled bullets. So it kind of creates that stress atmosphere where we could get shot and we got to shoot back. We worked with them, and we actually went to where we felt like it was responding to an actual threat. We took that threat out, and then the next phase was bringing the fire department in, where we escorted them. They actually we had a lot of, luckily a lot of volunteers that played victims, and we had to help escort the fire department out and stuff like that. So that's kind of how, to answer your questions, work is a bunch of people are going to get a bunch of police officers from Denton County, Denton Police Department, everybody that's basically a police officer in the area is going to come to the scene. As soon as we establish that we have enough or the threat's done, that's when the medical saving part comes into play. So that's a good question because it gave me, like I said, a chance to talk about the fire department because we didn't normally get that. That's a new thing, and it was really great training. We learned that the fire department doesn't listen to the police so well. So, not just kidding. Yes.
Other than the test button, which of the alert buttons do you have to use the most often?
I'm going to I haven't hit me personally, not one. I don't hit the button. I'm not allowed.
Tornado.
Yeah.
We had 2 last semester. That button.
And probably the test button, like you mentioned. But like I said, it goes back to my statement to him. We are here for active shooter. I know that, but it goes back to the operational, what's realistically going to happen here. The tornado threat is a bigger jeopardy and more likely to happen to this campus than the active shooter because we had 2 tornado warnings last year. Last year I was literally driving away and I got an eagle alert like, oh, there's a tornado warning happening, so that's a good example. Like that's going to happen in the spring. And so we hit that button frequently. So, but good question. Yes, ma'am.
What's considered a priority 1 call?
What's a what?
What's considered a priority 1 call?
Priority 1, like those calls, like we don't waste time, let's get there. Like lights, sirens, everybody get there. We got to get there fast. Obviously, if someone's reporting a theft that their items were stolen yesterday, we don't want to respond with lights and sirens for an item that's already been stolen. So that would be more like a priority 3 call. So the higher the numbers go, the lower the priority response is. So priority 1's the we don't waste time, let's get there. Thank you for clarifying that. My chief gets on me all the time about talking cop talk and not clarifying for average people that don't know cop talk. So thank you for fixing that. All right, I'm not holding anybody hostage. That's an illegal detention, so y'all are free to go. I'm just going to hang out up here. Let me get y'all my email up on the website. Also, if you're interested, because we want to thank y'all for being here, one last thing is we have these little pocket response cards for active shooter. We know in the high stress moment, despite me sitting there saying remain calm, you're going to have a panic moment like, I don't remember what to do. And that's where having this card available to you helps, because you can quickly look at it and go, that's right, and then do something. So these cards are up here if you want to come grab one. So thank y'all very much, and y'all have a wonderful day. Thank you. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate that.
Quick question.
Yes, sir. Let me try to turn this off real quick for you and I. Let's see. Off. Hold it down.